What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing 2/3 of the weather trio in the Open Great League with Shadow Groudon and Kyogre, both getting buffs in the fast move department this season, and then seemingly quite a random third choice of Tinkaton, one of the most meta Pokemon out there after its community day, which is quite unlike this channel to be showcasing such a strong Pokemon. However, it's because of that recent community day that I'm pairing these three together, because their signature moves of Gigaton Hammer, Origin Pulse, and Precipice Blades all have exactly the same stats. Now by now I'm sure you guys know just how strong Gigaton Hammer is, so put an identical move on two attack-weighted Shadow Legendaries, and you've got an incredibly destructive back line. Now, I've mentioned this in a previous video, but the Waterfall buff on Shadow Kyogre feels like the biggest upgrade for any Pokemon this season, transforming it from a borderline unusable Pokemon to one of the most fun Pokemon to play this season. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still miles off of being meta, but my god, some of the things this Pokemon can now do honestly feel illegal. With that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. What do you think is the most fun legendary Pokemon to use in the Great League this season? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. I should go into the first battle, leading Tinkaton into Gastrodon. So this, of course, not a great matchup for me at all. I'm going to say swapping into Shadow Kyogre. The opponent going to bank some energy before swapping out into Dunsparce. However, in doing so, they allow me to reach an Origin Pulse. Origin Pulse, not respected. It gets the one shot. They come back in with the Gastrodon, and we don't really have much fast move pressure across the remainder of my team. So I'm actually going to look to shield here and force a CMP tie here with the next Body Slam. Avalanche, of course, going to look to grab a shield there, and now I can let Shadow Kyogre go down. Now, they're still fairly healthy here. I don't think I will be able to get the KO with a Fire Punch, and I don't really want to full send a Precipice Blades either, so I'm going to bank the energy and then swap into my Tinkaton. I believe this will just be a Water Pulse, which is going to hit for neutral damage there, but that's still absolutely fine with me, and now we can look to overfarm ever so slightly and fire off the Bulldoze. Bulldoze, going to get the KO there, but their final Pokemon is a Talonflame, and unfortunately, I've only got resisted damage throughout the remainder of my team, but the opponent weirdly ends up shielding a Bulldoze. That is such a strange play, but now Precipice Blades, that is resisted damage, but no one told Shadow Groudon about that. We are just absolutely disrespecting typings right now as we get the Mudshot farm down, and we're able to take that game. Now, I really don't know why they shielded the Bulldoze there. I think even if they didn't shield that, maybe we end up getting the KO anyways if we baited with a Fire Punch, but still definitely a lot trickier. But anyways, into the next battle, another pretty poor lead matchup for us, and actually a really tricky core breaker for the entire team, but I'm able to grab a shield advantage, so at this point, I'm actually just going to let the Tinkaton go down. They end up baiting with a Seed Bomb there, which is fine with me. This is going to force them to full send a Shadow Ball because another bait still won't quite get the KO, so now I'm going to come in with my Shadow Kyogre. Of course, I am resisting the Incinerate damage, so it's actually not that bad of a matchup for me, especially with a shield advantage. So gonna shield the Seed Bomb, gonna look to go for 3 more Waterfalls, and then fire off the Avalanche. Avalanche actually going to grab the final shield from the opponent, and I'm hoping since they throw straight away, maybe I can fully Waterfall farm them down. The opponent actually going to not allow that to happen, instead swapping into Greninja, and I've only got resisted damage, but once again, Shadow Kyogre just does not care about typings. We Waterfall farm down the Gourgeist as well. Their final Pokemon is a Firefang Marwile, and honestly, I wasn't quite sure if I would live the Firefang damage and reach another Origin Pulse, so instead, we swap out into Groudon, Fire Punch, gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So going into the next battle, we're going to see Tinkaton into Fortress. Now, I will say with Tinkaton, since it is such a strong Pokemon now, a lot of teams are sort of built respecting it and kind of covering with maybe multiple answers to Tinkaton. So whilst, yes, it is by far the best Pokemon on this team, it did also have quite a lot of really hard answers to it. So we're going to come in with the Groudon. They go for the Sand Tomb there before swapping into Wigglytuff. And you know what? We might as well just full send. Precipice Blades is going to grab a shield there. However, we already have a Gigaton Hammer, so it doesn't really matter. We've grabbed the shield. We're now going to get the one shot anyways. Gigaton Hammer gets the KO. They come back in with the Fortress, and at this point, I think I will just no shield once again. However, the opponent going to allow me to reach another Gigaton Hammer, and that is resisted damage, sorry, but it still does decent damage there. So at this point, we're going to no shield as they go for a Sand Tomb. I was trying to swap out there, but it didn't go through for some reason, so now we might as well just stay in and go for a Bulldoze. Bulldoze going to grab the final shield, and it drops their defense there, which is huge for me, because now I can shield this. I don't think they're quite a back-to-back charge moves here, so we Waterfall farm them down. Their final Pokemon gonna be a Quagsire, and once again, Origin Pulse, all shields are down on the opponent's end. It gets the one shot up against the Quagsire, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's will win there into the next battle. We can see another fortress in the lead. So once again, we're going to stay in this lead matchup initially here, and then eventually, after they do throw a sand tomb, I will look to swap out. So we're going to bank the energy because this energy is pretty good into certain Pokemon, obviously not against the fortress. Here, now, I could have actually gone for the Fire Punch straight away. I'm really surprised I didn't there. So, yeah, not the best play on my end. I still overfarm. Why didn't I just throw a Fire Punch? What am I doing there? Honestly, such a poor play, because Precipice Blade does huge damage, but I could have already grabbed a shield from that fortress very comfortably there with a Fire Punch, potentially even two of them before they swapped out. Whereas now, we get them very low, but of course, they debuffed my attack stat there, so Precipice Blade didn't quite get the one-shot. We're now going to come in with the Shadow Kyogre. I'm going to look to shield once, and then Waterfall farm them down. They're actually going to swap into Charger Bug, and that is quite important to note. I completely forgot that I did not fully farm down the Kanto Marowak there, so that might play into how I play out the rest of the game here. But either way, they're going to go for a Discharge. Discharge does decent damage. It will, however, unfortunately put me into Volt Switch farm down range, which isn't really ideal. But the opponent going for that farm down, but then they swap back into Fortress, and this does give me a lifeline. Now, of course, they can go for Sand Tomb. Sand Tomb gonna drop my defense. Volt Switch is hitting for big damage, but I'm able to farm to back-to-back avalanches, and here, I thought I had the game in the bag, but I completely forgot that they still had a low HP Kanto Marowak, so we go for Avalanche, but of course, that was the right play on their end. Just basically force my energy. They've got the Discharge loaded. Discharge takes out Shadow Kyogre, and unfortunately, I lose that game. But certainly, if I just threw some Fire Punches up against the Fortress early in the game, I feel like we could have won that one. But either way, GG's to our trainer into the next battle. We're going to see Azumarill in the lead. So this is a fine matchup for me, especially fine if they are not on Hydro Pump. If they've got Hydro Pump, then it's slightly more neutral, but still a slightly positive matchup for the Tinkaton. Either way, I'm just going to no-shield. Typically, I will just no-shield my Tinkaton, as it is by far the strongest Pokemon on this team, and I do kind of need to save shields for my backline. So here, they're going to swap into Credilli. That is fine with me. And here, I am actually going to go against what I just said, just because all shields are now down on the opponent's end, and I feel like we can get the one shot here despite being debuffed with a Gigaton Hammer. So we're going to go for the Gigaton Hammer, and unfortunately it actually just barely doesn't quite get the KO there. So I'm just going to no-shield now. We can come in with a Groudon. Of course, Acid is resisted damage there, so we don't take much damage. We get the Mudshot farm down, but unfortunately, we don't exactly get a huge energy advantage. However, we don't really need it here up against the Azumarill, because Precipice Blades gets the one-shot. Their final Pokemon is going to be a Farret. And Kyogre, you can just stay on the bench for this one. We can just safely shield here. And of course, we've just seen a one-shot up against Azumarill. Precipice Blades is easily going to be enough damage to get the one-shot up against the Farret as well. And I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. I'm going to see Galar and Stunfisk in the lead. So, not a great matchup for me. I do have two better answers in the back. So, I'm going to say swap into Kyogre. And the opponent going to come in with an Alolan Sandslash. This is quite a strange ABA-style team from the opponent so far. We full send Origin Pulse. We grab that shield advantage. Unfortunately, though, you're going to see Drill Run puts me into range, but they can just go straight for a full farm down. But that's okay with me. We grab the shield advantage. I'm hoping Groudon with a shield advantage in the end game should be able to sweep here. Now, even though it is super effective damage here, Drill Run is just barely going to two-shot us, but we tank it pretty comfortably, so I can now go and full send a Gigaton Hammer. I don't think Bulldoze would quite KO from that range, and it's just not a very good move, but unfortunately, they're going to have Azumarill in the back. Now, we have already seen Precipice Blades does huge damage in this matchup, but they still have a shield, and they end up shielding the first. And you can see Mudshots this season really don't deal much damage at all, so whilst we did get the one-shot in the previous battle, that Azumarill was slightly less healthy, whereas this time around, they are unfortunately going to be able to tank that, and I am just barely able to swap out of this matchup, but the opponent already at the charge move. I have to no-shield. It is just an Ice Beam there, but it's already game over. I don't think Groudon is going to be able to reach a charge move up against the Galar and Stunfisk here, especially if they farm me down, but they end up throwing energy. At this point, it doesn't really matter. Rockside gets the KO. We come back in with the Groudon. Maybe could have reached a Fire Punch, but Azumarill was still way too healthy, so unfortunately, Rockside will get the KO, and we end up losing that game. But GG's up on there into the next battle. We're going to see Greninja in the lead. So this is a little bit of an awkward matchup for me, just because whilst, yes, we do have Fairy Wind, Gigaton Hammer is going to be resisted damage, and they do very comfortably outpace me. However, they're going to swap into Corviknight. I'm going to come in with the Shadow Groudon, and I'm just going to no-shield the first charge move. They go for Air Cutter. Air Cutter not going to get the boost. However, you can see we're already in the yellow health range, which means the next Air Cutter will pretty much get the KO. So the opponent going to throw just before we reach that next Fire Punch. Very good timing on their end. opponent, so I'm going to force the shield here if I want to maintain alignment. I'm going to look to overfarm ever so slightly, but I can't overfarm by much. Fire Punch gets the KO. They come back in with Greninja, and I'm actually going to swap out straight away into my Tinkaton. Now, Gigaton Hammer, as I mentioned, is resisted damage, but the opponent, they're going to have to full send a Hydro Cannon here. The opponent going to go for a Night Slash bait. That is fine with me. That will allow me to reach a Bulldoze, and we are putting them close to range where Bulldoze will get the KO, so the opponent ends up shielding. Now, they do go for full farm down. They've got quite a lot of energy here, so I'm going to come in with Shadow Kyogre, assume they throw one fast move, and then throw the charge move, which means I'm able to catch it onto my Shadow Groudon. Night Slash gets the KO, but their final Pokemon is going to be a Credilli, and this is fine with me. We've got Avalanche for coverage. Avalanche, super effective. It gets the KO. They come back in with Greninja. They've got a Night Slash already, but they're not going to reach back to back, so might as well shield the first, Waterfall farm them down, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's upon there, into the next battle, I can see another Gourgeist in the lead. So once again, going to stay in this matchup here. Honestly, hopefully, they do just no-shield the Gigaton Hammer, and that does put me in a much better position. But we're going to full send it, and this time they do actually let that go through. So at this point, I really don't mind no-shielding a Shadow Ball here. I might just barely live this, actually, and I do. So I swap into my Kyogre, but I'm not able to get the full farm down there. Unfortunately, we get a one-turn swap, which means they reach a last-second Seed Bomb, which certainly is not ideal. However, they're going to come in with Licky Licky. We've already got the energy for an Origin Pulse with full sending, and they don't respect it. That is a very bulky Pokemon that just got one shot by the Origin Pulse, and at this point, it's game over. The opponent goes for a Psychic Fangs there, which actually makes my life slightly easier because now they're not boosted in their attack stat. All I have to do, shield the first charge move. Quite likely that they end up baiting. Really don't care. They actually know they full send the Aura Wheel, but it doesn't matter. They're swapping back into the electric typing. We can just Mud Shot farm them down, and so the opponent concedes the match. So, GG's upon there, into the next battle. I see Shadow for Alligator in the lead. So, not a great matchup for the Tinkaton, but I am just going to stay in anyways because Kyogre and Groudon are also going to struggle. Whereas, if I can chip with a resisted Gigaton Hammer, potentially, I can eventually put them into farm down range for either one of my Pokemon in the back. So, here we go for the Gigaton Hammer, dealing big damage. The opponent going to look to throw as late as possible, winning CMP, but that's absolutely okay with me. Groudon should be able to Mud Shot farm them down just before they reach the next charge move, and I do get a slight energy advantage. But they're now going to come in with a Wigglytuff, and at this point they are almost guaranteed to shield here. So this time I'm not full sending Precipice Blades. Instead, I'm going to go for a Fire Punch. I tried to commit to another Precipice Blades. It doesn't look like I'm getting there, so we settle for a second Fire Punch, but actually Fire Punch grabs the final shield. However, we're still not in the best position as this is my final Pokemon, and unfortunately they are going to permanently debuff me with the Icy Wind. We do still have some play here, but it really depends on what they've got in the back. They can now go for a Swift, and unfortunately they're going to have a Tinkaton in the back, and because of that debuff to my attack stat, Origin Pulse, whilst it is going to do heavy damage, it's just barely not enough damage to put them into Waterfall farm down range. Bulldoze doesn't quite KO, but they get the farm down there just before we're able to farm them down, and unfortunately I do lose that game. But GG's upon there, into the next battle. I can see Shadow Drapion in the lead. This is a great matchup for the Tinkaton. I'm going to no-shield the first charge move here as they will just settle for an Aqua Tail, which really doesn't do too much damage. They now swap into Fortress. I'm going to come in with the Shadow Groudon, and I'm able to outpace them here before they throw a move. Fire Punch, double super effective, and it easily gets the one shot. That's what I should have done last time round up against the Fortress. But either way, I'm now going to look to shield here as they can just barely outpace me to the Aqua Tail, and here, honestly, Precipice Blades is going to be massive overkill. But I feel like Fire Punch just barely wouldn't quite get the KO, so Precipice Blades is going to guarantee a shield from the opponent. I'm now going to no-shield this. Aqua Tail gets the KO. I believe I put them into range where even a Bulldoze should get the knockout here, so we can just settle for that Bulldoze, and Bulldoze does exactly that. Their final Pokemon is going to be Altaria in the back, and this game should be over. However, what I would like to do is grab the final shield, which I'm able to do, and then just wait for them to throw some energy, but the opponent does not throw straight away. Honestly, I'd quite like to land an Avalanche with my Shadow Kyogre. However, at this point, I realize that's probably not going to happen now because I'm going to no-shield this. They do full send the Flamethrower, but by the time I get to an Avalanche, unfortunately, Kyogre will just be able to fully Waterfall farm them down there and not be able to throw the charge move. But either way, still a very comfortable matchup for the Shadow Kyogre with that shield advantage, and so I'm able to take that game. So, GG's from there into the next battle to see a Shadow Dust Noir in the lead. So this is going to be a neutral matchup here. I should very comfortably win the zero shield scenario, and that's exactly what I'm going to try and play out here. If the opponent does end up shielding, I will swap into my Shadow Kyogre, or potentially just force them to throw some more energy here. So we go for Gigaton Hammer, the opponent is going to shield there, and the opponent is now going to be forced to throw some energy. This one, we're definitely just going to let this go down. We're going to come in with the Shadow Kyogre, and I'm hoping Waterfall can apply enough pressure here to shield once, and then fully farm them down. We're going to get fairly low, so actually instead I'm going to swap into my Shadow Groudon to get slightly ahead on energy. I do predict this is going to be a double normal backline with Wigglytuff and Leaky Tongue as the two remaining Pokemon, and so far it's looking to be exactly that. We're going to go for a Precipice Blades. The opponent is going to shield, but we can still reach a last second Fire Punch, and I believe we have an Avalanche already loaded on Shadow Kyogre. So the opponent, they've got the Charge Move loaded, but it doesn't matter as Avalanche going to be winning CMP, and if it is a Licky in the back, that's perfect for me because we are going to take minimal damage from the fast moves. I can very comfortably outpace them to an Origin Pulse before they get to back-to-back moves here, but I might as well overfarm as much as possible, throw as late as possible here with Kyogre, because Origin Pulse gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle to see Tinkaton into Credilli. So this is going to be a great lead matchup for me. The opponent going to say swapping into Azumarill, and this is still fine with me. I'm just going to choose to stay in here. Of course, we don't know if they've got Hydro Pump or not, but either way, I don't really mind if they do end up full sending one, as I will eventually just swap out into my Kyogre and potentially look to Waterfall farm them down and come out with a ton of energy with my Avalanches. But actually, they're not on Hydro Pumps, so instead, we're just going to stay in and go for a Gigaton Hammer. Gigaton Hammer is going to be no shielded, and let's see what they want to do. The opponent's going to come in with a Jellicent, which unfortunately is a bit tricky for me to deal with here, especially with all shields still in play. We go for the Gigaton Hammer, that does decent damage, and now I swap into Shadow Kyogre. Of course, gonna shield here, they full send the Shadow Ball before swapping out into Credilli. Now I can look to overfarm just a little bit here and then full send an Avalanche. Avalanche gonna be coming through and it's going to grab a shield from the opponent. They're gonna throw just before I reach the next charge move. I did consider shielding here, but instead I'm actually just gonna no shield. But then I make a pretty significant mistake here. Honestly, I don't know why I came in with the Groudon. I slightly miscounted. I was gonna try and catch the charge move, but it backfires massively as I lost track of their energy. Now I'm gonna have to make a catch here onto my Tinkaton up against the Jellicent instead, but they've still got a shield in place. So whilst yes, I can get the KO with the Precipice Blades, I'm going to go for an undercharge here, hoping this does allow a Mudshot farm down. It gets the KO anyways, and unfortunately we're just way too behind on energy. I can reach back-to-back Fire Punches, but you're going to see this is going to be a CMP tie, so of course they can just safely shield that up there, go for a Grass Knot. Grass Knot super effective into my Groudon, and unfortunately I end up losing that game. But again, I feel like I just really horribly misplayed that battle there. So GG's to that trainer into next battle. Gonna see a Skeledirge in the lead. Not the best matchup for me. Gonna be safe swapping into Shadow Groudon. And I'm met with a Furret. So I'm gonna go straight for the Precipice Blades here. Precipice Blades gonna be shielded by the opponent. And the opponent is not gonna be able to commit to a full farm down. So they're forced to throw some energy. They go for a Trailblaze, boosting up their attack stat. But that should mean, hopefully, that they got Swift as the other charge move. Meaning I'm completely walling them here. But no, they're actually on Trailblaze and Brick Break, which is quite interesting. Either way, doesn't really matter. Still a very dominant matchup for the Tinkaton, so we look to overfarm. Gigaton Hammer gets the KO. They come back in with the Skeledirge, and the opponent's final Pokemon is a Licky, but they are down a shield, and so I'm just full sending here. I feel like they might call a bait again. Origin Pulse gets the one shot once again up against the bulky Licky. And at this point, this is game over. We've still got two shields here. The opponent is desperately trying to fight for the win here, but there's just not much they can do. I did consider no shielding here and then Fairy Wind farming them down, but you know what? Waterfall will register after the charge move. We get the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. I see Shadow Galvantula in the lead. So, a bit of a tricky matchup for me, but I can probably get a shield advantage in, well, the zero shield scenario. I feel like Gigaton Hammer probably gets the KO anyways. So, I'm going to no shield a discharge here, and then I'm going to go straight for the Gigaton Hammer. Gigaton Hammer is resisted damage, but like I mentioned, will do huge damage to a Shadow Galvantula. The opponent going to bank the energy before swapping into a Hypno, but this is not a Shadow Hypno, which means, unfortunately, Precipice Blaze just barely misses out on getting the one shot. That is is so unfortunate. The opponent also on Ice Punch. I thought it was a guarantee that it would be Thunder Punch and Shadow Ball, and as a result, Groudon ends up going down there. We come in with Shadow Kyogre, and I realized they've got back-to-back discharges. I'm just going to stay in, go for the Waterfall farm down here. I will come out with an Avalanche loaded, and Tinkaton, I believe, does have a tiny bit of residual energy here, but unfortunately, they're going to have Jellicent in the back. There is just not much I can do. I might as well full send an Origin Pulse just to see how much damage it does, but the opponent gonna no-shield anyways, and unfortunately, I might as well just concede the match there. GG's to that trainer. Into next battle, we're going to see knocked out in the lead. So pretty positive matchup for the Tinkaton, but they're going to swap into Grumpig, and I don't have a direct response in the backline, so I might as well just choose to stay in here. Kyogre is still going to have a fine matchup up against the Noctowl, however, Groudon is really going to struggle. So I probably do want to maintain alignment here, but it's not that important that I line Tinkaton to the Noctowl. That was a really bad start there. Anyways, we're going to go for a second Gigaton Hammer, and it's able to get the KO. Then I'm going to come in with Shadow Quagsire. I'm swapping out, hoping to bait out the Noctowl, and I'm able to do exactly that. I tried to throw on CMP, and I think that's what happened here. We go for Avalanche. Avalanche, gotta be shielded. No, actually, never mind. That was not a CMP tie. However, I'm able to grab that final shield. So Sky Attack gets the KO there. Now, we do have some energy on the Tinkaton, so I'm going to shield here. I'm then going to try and bank a Precipice Blades, and then swap back into my Tinkaton, and I'm just barely able to reach a Charge Move here. Honestly, I'm quite surprised the opponent did not swap back into Quagsire, maybe just expecting to Mudshot farm me down here, come out with the Octel loaded, but they actually throw some energy. Now, they have back-to-back, but it doesn't matter. Shadow Groudon has the Precipice Blades loaded, and Precipice Blades gets the one-shot up against the Shadow Quagsire, and I'm able to take that final game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated, and with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.